Miwon, the Gardeners of Kepler 442b. Part 1. First Contact. Protocol Captain Lee Min-ho stood on the bridge of the terraforming vessel New Eden, watching the barren surface of Kepler 442b rotate slowly beneath them. The mission seemed straightforward, until Communications Officer Park Ji-woo detected the crystalline structures dotting the planet's surface. "Sir, we're receiving transmissions," Ji-woo reported. "The planet isn't empty." The first contact with the native Talaxians was awkward. Ambassador Kim So-young attempted to explain humanity's terraforming mission to the curious crystal beings, who hummed in confusion at the concept of gardening an entire world. Elder Talaxian Veltar's translucent form flickered with skeptical patterns. "Your species wishes to transform our neighbor world. This seems beyond reason." Part 2. The impossible dream. Dr. Choi Hyun-woo ignored the alien observers documenting every human action. The atmospheric processes hummed to life under his supervision while botanist Dr. Yang Eun-ji prepared the first seed banks. Across the galaxy, species placed wagers. The reptilian Drex gave humans 6 months before abandoning the project. The aquatic nebulans predicted complete failure within a year. Engineer Kang Do-yoon wiped sweat from his brow as he calibrated another processor. "Let them watch," he muttered. "We'll show them what humans can do." Part 3. Seeds in stone. 3 months passed. Atmospheric readings showed steady oxygen increases. Biologist Dr. Lim Hai-won knelt beside the first green shoots breaking through processed soil, tears in her eyes. The Talaxian observers had grown from skeptical to fascinated. Veltar approached project leader Nam Tai-hyun with unprecedented directness. "Your people, they truly reshape worlds. Our calculations suggested impossibility." Nam smiled, gesturing toward the expanding green patches. "Humans don't accept impossibility easily." Part 4. Bloom. 1 year later, rolling hills of earth grass swayed in alien winds. The first trees cast shadows on what had been lifeless rock. Galactic delegations arrived daily, their ships crowding orbital space. Dr. Song Mi-kyung led tours through the growing forests, while Kim Jae-sung managed the increasingly complex agricultural sectors. The Talaxians had become active partners, offering rare minerals to accelerate the transformation. "We never understood life's potential," Veltar admitted to Captain Lee. Part 5. Garden Worlds. 5 years after first landing, Kepler 442b bloomed with impossible beauty. Rivers flowed past flowering meadows, while Earth animals grazed in alien sunlight. The success sparked a galactic terraforming revolution. Director Park Soo-jin fielded requests from dozens of species seeking humanity's help with their own dead worlds. The Talaxians established a permanent embassy, their crystal cities harmonizing with human settlements. Captain Lee stood in his garden, watching Talaxian younglings play with human children among the flowers. What began as humanity's dream had become the galaxy's hope. Across the stars, dead worlds waited for the gardeners to bring them life. The Dr. Choi Hyun-woo felt the vibrations through the metal deck plates as the massive atmospheric processors roared to life. Each machine stood 3 stories tall, their spinning turbines creating a hurricane of activity that would slowly transform this dead rock into something resembling Earth. The alien observers floating nearby made soft, clicking sounds, but Hyun-woo had learned to tune them out over the past week. "Temperature readings are stable," called out his assistant technician Bae Min-soo, his voice barely audible over the mechanical symphony. "Pressure systems responding normally." The Talaxians had been watching everything with those strange, crystalline eyes of theirs, their bodies shifting colors like living mood rings. Today they glowed a suspicious orange that reminded Hyun-woo of traffic cones back home in Seoul. He wondered if orange meant doubt in their color language. Across the temporary landing platform, botanist Dr. Yang Eun-ji carefully arranged rows of sealed containers in the makeshift laboratory they'd assembled from prefab modules. Each container held thousands of seeds from Earth, specially modified to survive in alien soil. She handled them like precious jewels, which in a way they were. These tiny packages contained the genetic blueprints for entire ecosystems. The protein sequences look good, Yunji reported, scanning each container with her handheld analyzer. The genetic modifications should help them adapt to the local mineral content. She paused, watching a Talaxian drift closer to observe her work. Assuming our crystal friends don't mind sharing their planet with Earth daisies. The nearest Talaxian, a smaller one they'd nicknamed Spark, because of the way light danced through its form, pulsed a questioning blue. Through their translation devices, its voice came out as musical chimes. These small containers hold life? Millions of potential lives, Yunji smiled, holding up a seed packet. Each one could become a tree that lives for hundreds of years. Spark's colors shifted to amazed purple. Other Talaxians began clustering around the seed laboratory, their forms creating a rainbow of curiosity. Meanwhile, news of the human terraforming project had spread through the galactic communication networks faster than anyone expected. On the water world of Aquaticus Prime, the dolphin-like nebulans were taking bets in their underwater cities. Their oddsmakers gave humanity a 30% chance of lasting 6 months before the project collapsed under its own impossible scope. The reptilian Drex Empire was even less optimistic. In their desert throne rooms on Scales Major, the lizard generals calculated that humans would abandon Kepler 442b within 4 months. Mammals lack the patience for such endeavors, hissed General Vexka to his subordinates. They dream too big and plan too small. Even the machine intelligences of the synthetic collective were running probability calculations. Their quantum computers, housed in massive orbital stations, gave the human project a 12% chance of achieving even partial success. The machines found human optimism to be a fascinating but ultimately fatal flaw. Back on Kepler 442b, Engineer Kang, Duyun was having none of the galactic pessimism. Sweat dripped from his forehead as he fine-tuned the atmospheric processor's filtration systems, his hands moving with practiced precision across the control interfaces. The machine was working harder than designed, trying to scrub centuries of accumulated dust and chemical residue from the thin atmosphere. Oxygen output is up 3% from yesterday, he announced to his team of technicians scattered around the massive machine, carbon dioxide levels dropping steadily. A group of Talaxians had taken to following Do-Yoon around like curious students, their forms shifting from orange skepticism to yellow interest as the numbers improved day by day. When one of the younger Talaxians asked how humans could be so confident about changing an entire world, Do-Yoon wiped his hands on his coveralls and grinned. "Let them watch," he muttered to his fellow engineers, gesturing toward a cluster of alien observers. "We'll show them what humans can do when we set our minds to something." His words carried across the worksite, picked up by other human crews who nodded their agreement. There was something infectious about human determination that even the aliens were beginning to notice. The Talaxians' colors had shifted from suspicious orange to curious yellow, and some of the younger ones were starting to ask technical questions about the terraforming equipment. The betting pools across the galaxy began receiving some unexpected wagers. A few far-sighted species were quietly placing small bets on human success, not because the odds were good, but because there was something unsettling about human confidence. These mammals acted like they'd already won, even while standing on a dead rock surrounded by machines that might not work. As the twin suns of the Kepler system set behind the horizon, casting long shadows across the construction site, the atmospheric processors continued their patient work. The Talaxians glowed softly in the gathering darkness, their crystalline forms reflecting the growing hope that maybe, just maybe, these determined humans might actually pull off the impossible. 3 months had crawled by since the first atmospheric processors began their relentless work, and the numbers on Dr. Lim Hae-won's datapad told a story that made her heart race. Oxygen levels had climbed from a barely detectable trace to nearly 8% of Earth normal. The soil treatment facilities had processed over 10,000 cubic meters of sterile ground, infusing it with nutrients and beneficial bacteria that had traveled 27 light-years from home. But it was the small green shoots poking through, the reddish alien dirt that brought tears to her eyes. Hae-won knelt carefully beside the first successful sprouts, her knees pressing into soil that had been lifeless rock just weeks ago. These weren't the prettiest plants from her seed collection, just hardy pioneer grasses designed to survive. Almost anything, but seeing them wave gently in the artificially thickened breeze felt like witnessing a miracle. Recording day 92 of surface operations, she whispered into her handheld recorder, her voice thick with emotion. First, confirmed plant growth in Sector 7. Specimens appear healthy and are responding well to the modified soil composition. She paused, watching the tiny green blades catch the alien sunlight. Sometimes I can't believe we're actually doing this. The Talaxian observers had been following her daily inspection rounds with growing interest. What started as suspicious, orange glowing had shifted through yellow curiosity to something approaching excited green fascination. They no longer kept their distance, but floated close enough to examine every detail of her work. Young Spark, the small Talaxian, who had become particularly interested in the seed laboratory, pulsed with rapid color changes as it observed the growing plants. Through their improved translation system, its voice carried notes of wonder. These life forms adapt to our world's minerals? Better than we hoped, Haywan replied, carefully taking soil samples around the plants. The genetic modifications we made allow them to process your planet's unique iron compounds. They're actually using the local minerals to strengthen their root systems. Other Talaxians began gathering around the growing patches, their crystalline forms creating living rainbows across the worksite. Some of the elder Talaxians, who had initially kept their distance from human activities, now drifted closer each day to observe the impossible transformation. The most dramatic change came from Elder Veltar, the ancient Talaxian who had first questioned the sanity of human ambitions. For 3 months the Elder had maintained a cautious distance, observing but never engaging directly with the human workers. That changed on day 95, when Veltar approached project leader Nam Taehyun with unprecedented directness. Nam had been reviewing expansion plans with his engineering team when the Elder Talaxian's massive crystalline form cast prismatic shadows across their holographic displays. The usual protocol was for Talaxians to announce themselves with harmonic tones, but Veltar simply appeared, its ancient form pulsing with complex patterns that their translators were still learning to interpret. "Your people," Veltar began, its voice carrying harmonics that suggested deep contemplation. "They truly reshape worlds. Our calculations suggested impossibility." Nam looked up from his plans, taking in the sight of this ancient being who had probably witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations. Around them, the steady hum of atmospheric processes provided a backdrop of human determination made audible. "Our calculations suggested the same thing," Nam admitted with a smile, gesturing toward the expanding patches of green that now dotted the landscape like hope made visible. "But humans don't accept impossibility easily. We prefer making the impossible inevitable." Veltar's colors shifted through a spectrum that the translation system interpreted as profound consideration mixed with growing respect. "Your species possesses unusual persistence. We're stubborn," Nam laughed. "Sometimes that's exactly what the universe needs." The conversation between Nam and Veltar was being monitored by communication arrays across the galaxy, as various species had developed intense interest in the human terraforming project. The betting pools that had started as entertainment were becoming serious economic indicators. On the aquatic world of Tidal Station, Nebulan economists were frantically recalculating their odds as reports of successful plant growth reached their underwater cities. The dolphin-like beings had initially bet against human success, but now their financial advisors were quietly shifting investments toward companies that might benefit from expanded terraforming technology. The reptilian Drex Empire was experiencing similar uncertainty in their desert strongholds. General Vexka, who had confidently predicted human failure, found himself staring at reconnaissance reports that clearly showed green patches spreading across Kepler 442b's surface. His subordinates were beginning to ask uncomfortable questions about the Empire's own failed attempts at planetary modification. Most significantly, the machine intelligences of the synthetic collective had begun running new probability calculations. every few hours instead of their usual weekly assessments. Their quantum computers were detecting patterns in human behavior that didn't match any known civilization models. The machines were starting to request detailed technical specifications for atmospheric processing equipment. Within days of Veltar's conversation with Nam, the first formal terraforming consultation requests began arriving through diplomatic channels. The insectoid hive clusters of Mandible Nebula wanted to know if humans could help restore atmosphere to their war-damaged colonies. The Crystalline Prism Federation inquired about adapting human techniques for silicon-based ecosystems. Even more surprising were the private messages from individual species members. Scientists, engineers, and planetary administrators from dozens of worlds were quietly asking for technical data, offering everything from rare minerals to advanced technology in exchange for terraforming knowledge. As the fourth month began, HFY walked through increasingly large patches of Earth vegetation growing in alien soil, with Talaxian observers glowing contentedly nearby. The impossible was becoming inevitable, one green shoot at a time. 1 year after the first green shoots had pushed through processed soil, Kepler 442b looked like a completely different world. Rolling hills covered in earthgrass stretched toward the horizon, swaying gently in winds that now carried the sweet scent of growing things instead of sterile dust. The first saplings had grown into young trees, their branches casting real shadows on ground that had known only harsh alien sunlight for millions of years. Dr. Song Mi-kyung barely recognized the landscape as she led another group of alien visitors along the marked trail through what everyone now called the New Eden Forest. Her boots crunched on fallen leaves that had grown from seeds carried across the galaxy, while overhead, earthbirds that had been hatched in orbital nurseries sang from branches that shouldn't exist. The atmospheric composition has stabilized. At 18% oxygen, she explained to the delegation of insectoid hive cluster representatives, their compound eyes reflecting the dappled sunlight filtering through the canopy. We're seeing successful pollination between Earth species and some native microorganisms that survived in underground pockets. The insects clicked their approval, their translator devices rendering the sounds as expressions of amazement. One of their scientists, a creature that looked like a walking praying mantis made of silver metal, gestured toward a cluster of wildflowers with movements that seemed almost reverent. Your people accomplished in one rotation what our finest terraforming specialists said would take 50, the insect scientist declared through its mechanical voice box. How do you make life flourish so quickly? Mi-kyung smiled, kneeling to examine a patch of clover that was hosting both earth bees and curious Talaxian crystal sprites who seemed fascinated by the pollination process. We don't just plant things and hope they survive. We create entire ecosystems that support each other. The orbital space around Kepler 442b had become the busiest in the sector. Ships from dozens of different species arrived daily, their varied designs creating a constantly changing constellation above the transformed world. Sleek nebulan bioships that looked like living creatures swam through space alongside geometric synthetic collective vessels and the massive stone-carved ships of the ancient Lithoid Empire. Captain Lee Min-ho often stood in the observation deck of the orbital station they'd constructed, watching the traffic control displays that showed incoming vessels from across the galaxy. Each ship carried delegations eager to witness what was being called the miracle of Kepler 442b. Sir, we have 17 new arrivals requesting landing permits, reported Communications Officer Park Ji-woo, his console blinking with incoming messages. The Crystalline Prism Federation wants to bring a full scientific expedition, and the Quantum Collective is asking about establishing a research station. Down on the surface, Kim Jae-sung was dealing with the practical challenges of managing agricultural sectors that had grown far beyond their original plans. What started as test plots for basic crops had expanded into vast farms producing food for both the human colonists and their increasingly numerous alien visitors. The Talaxian mineral supplements are working better than expected, he reported during the daily coordination meeting, his tablet showing yields that would have been impossible on Earth. The local crystals they've been sharing with us seem to supercharge plant growth. We're getting harvest cycles that are 30% faster than normal. The partnership with the Talaxians had evolved far beyond anyone's expectations. Elder Veltar had become humanity's strongest advocate among the local population, and young Talaxians now worked alongside human engineers on expansion projects. Their ability to communicate with the planet's mineral structure had proven invaluable for understanding where to place new atmospheric processes and how to tap into underground water sources. We never understood life's potential, Veltar admitted to Captain Lee during one of their regular evening walks through the growing settlement. The ancient Talaxians' crystalline form glowed with warm golden hues that their translators interpreted as deep contentment. For eons we saw only stone where your species sees gardens. The transformation of human reputation across the galaxy had been even more dramatic than the transformation of Kepler 442b itself. Before the terraforming project, humanity had been seen as curious newcomers, interesting but not particularly significant in the grand scope of galactic civilization. Now quantum communication networks carried stories of the miracle workers who could bring dead worlds back to life. The Drex Empire, which had confidently predicted human failure, found themselves quietly negotiating for terraforming assistance. With their own damaged colonies, General Vexka had been replaced by younger leadership, more willing to acknowledge that mammals might actually know something about planetary engineering. The Nebulan betting pools had shifted so dramatically that several major financial institutions had to restructure their risk assessment algorithms. Species that had never shown interest in terraforming were suddenly funding research projects and sending their best scientists to study human techniques. Most significantly, the machine intelligences of the synthetic collective had reached a conclusion that surprised their creators. After analyzing thousands of hours of human terraforming data, their quantum computers declared that biological creativity was a crucial component that their logical systems had never properly calculated. For the first time in their existence, the machines were actively seeking to learn from organic beings. News reports carried by quantum relay networks now featured daily updates from Kepler 442b, with alien journalists struggling to describe the scope of the transformation. The sterile rock that had challenged human ambition just 1 year ago was now a thriving world, where Earth roses bloomed alongside crystalline Talaxian formations, creating gardens that no single species could have imagined. As evening fell over, New Eden Forest, Mikyung finished her latest tour and stood listening to the sound of earth crickets, harmonizing with Talaxian crystal song, while overhead, ships from across the galaxy waited their turn to witness the impossible made real. 5 years had transformed Kepler 442b from a lifeless rock into something that defied every prediction the galaxy's greatest minds had made. Rivers, now carved, paths through flowering meadows, their waters crystal clear as they wound between earth willows and Talaxian crystal formations that sang in harmonious tones when the wind passed through them. Herds of earth cattle grazed peacefully in pastures that glowed with bioluminescent alien grasses, while overhead, flocks of modified earthbirds shared the skies with native crystal-winged creatures that looked like living stained glass windows. Director Park. Sojin had moved her office to the top floor of New Eden's central administration building, where massive windows offered a panoramic view of the transformed landscape. Her days were now filled with an endless stream of requests from species across the galaxy, each seeking humanity's miraculous touch for their own struggling worlds. The Volcanic Consortium wants us to restore atmosphere to 12 planets in the magma sector, her assistant Lee Dae-yoon reported while scrolling through the latest batch of formal requests. The Crystalline Prism Federation is offering their entire mineral wealth for help with just 3 worlds, and the Synthetic Collective has requested a meeting about terraforming possibilities for machine consciousness. Sujin nodded, barely, looking up from her own datapad, filled with technical specifications and project timelines. Through her window, she could see the massive cargo ships landing daily at the expanded spaceport, carrying supplies and personnel for terraforming operations that now spanned 17 different star systems. The success of Kepler 442b had indeed sparked what historians were already calling the Great Terraforming Revolution. Species that had accepted dead worlds as permanent fixtures of their territories were suddenly commissioning human teams to bring them back to life. The galaxy's economy was reshaping itself around the possibility of unlimited habitable worlds. Indeed, the crystal cities that had grown alongside human settlements, Talaxian architects worked with human engineers to design structures that seemed to grow from the landscape itself. The Talaxians had established their first permanent embassy to any other species, a magnificent structure that looked like a frozen aurora reaching toward the sky. Elder Veltar now served as the first Talaxian ambassador to humanity, a position that carried enormous prestige in their crystalline society. Your species has taught us that cooperation creates possibilities we never imagined alone, Veltar explained to visiting dignitaries from the Aquatic Federation, its ancient form pulsing, with colors that conveyed deep satisfaction. We offer our world's knowledge freely because human gardens have given us more beauty than we possessed in 1,000,000 years of solitude. The partnership had produced innovations that neither species could have achieved independently. Talaxian, mineral singers could communicate with planetary geology in ways that allowed human engineers to place terraforming equipment with perfect precision. Human biological creativity, combined with Talaxian geological mastery, had created ecosystems that were more resilient and beautiful than anything found in nature. Captain Lee Min-ho had officially retired from active space duty, though at 45, he was hardly ready for a quiet life. Instead, he had become the unofficial mayor of New Eden's Central District, where his house sat surrounded by a garden that showcased the best of both Earth and Talaxian horticultural traditions. On this particular evening, Lee stood among his prized roses, watching a scene that never failed to fill him with wonder. Human children were playing hide-and-seek with young Talaxians, their laughter mixing with the crystal song that the alien younglings made when excited. The Talaxian children, who looked like small living gemstones that changed colors with their emotions, had learned to play human games while the human kids had mastered the art of crystal singing. "Found you!" shouted 8-year-old Kim Minji, discovering a young Talaxian named Chime hiding behind a cluster of glowing flowers. Chime's crystalline body flashed bright blue with delight before shifting to the golden hue that meant, "Your turn to seek." The sight of interspecies friendship blossoming as naturally as the flowers around them represented everything the terraforming project had accomplished. What began as humanity's desperate dream to make dead worlds livable had become the galaxy's greatest source of hope for the future. Reports from across the galaxy confirmed the revolution was accelerating. The first human-assisted terraforming project in Drex space had successfully restored atmosphere to a world that had been poisoned by industrial accidents centuries ago. Nebulan human joint ventures were creating underwater forest systems that supported both aquatic and terrestrial life. Even the machine intelligences had requested help designing worlds where synthetic consciousness could interact with biological ecosystems. The Galactic Council, which had initially viewed human terraforming efforts with polite skepticism, had officially designated humanity as the galaxy's primary terraforming specialists. Species that had warred for generations were now cooperating on joint restoration projects, united by their shared desire to heal damaged worlds. As the twin suns set behind New Eden's skyline, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that reflected off Talaxian crystal spires, Lee watched the children continue their games among flowers that bloomed in soil that had once been sterile rock. Somewhere above, ships were preparing to carry human terraforming teams to new worlds that waited in darkness, hoping for the miracle of life. The galaxy had learned that with enough determination, the right knowledge, and willing cooperation between species, even the most impossible dreams could take root and flourish. Humanity had found its cosmic calling among the stars, one seed at a time, one world at a time, one friendship at a time. The end.